What is up, everybody? Hello from COVID-19 isolation. Is everyone feeling perky today? Sorry, I'm feeling just extra excited to talk about watches. It's been just, mere minutes since I've been thinking about them, and there's a whole table in front of me full of watches right now. I'm sure all of you have not been getting your watch fill. How is everyone today? It is a very beautiful day here in Los Angeles. A little overcast. Slightly more humid than I would prefer, but still quite lovely. It's very nice to see spring in full action, even though we are getting lots and lots of not so great news coming in. Is it not kind of amazing to see how nature has been recapturing a lot of places? I go hiking a lot. I say that a lot, and it's been amazing to me that in just a couple of weeks, how quickly animals start to return to trails, plants start to grow and move over trails, you start to see more life. It's been very, very interesting for me to go ahead and experience all that, especially since we always think of, man's descent on nature as being a one-way street, but to see things kind of reverse. Obviously, it's not intentional, but to see things reverse in these times is a very interesting and different thing. Anyways, hello to everyone there. Lots of cheap stuff on the desk. If you come to this show to see expensive watches, I'm really sorry. I think there's some other channel out there about some guy who's pouring champagne on his Rolexes. I'm not really clear what people try to say. There's people talk about money so much when it comes to talking about watches. I understand these are expensive, but could somebody explain to me why, there's people there just like, show me expensive watches? What is that about? What is it that people are actually asking for when they see your watches are not expensive enough? There aren't enough bling. There aren't enough, ultra luxury things out there. Like, what is the actual point that someone's trying to make? I'm not really quite sure what it is. If you are someone and you are a buyer who has all that extra money, do you not want your watches to be exclusive? If a bunch of people also had them on their table, would that not make you feel like those expensive watches aren't that worth it? The Champagne on Watches channel? Yes, I'm going to create one. It's just a bunch of watches, the nicer the better. And we'll pour different champagne on there, and we'll evaluate how these different champagnes affect the watch or how they make them look. Maybe we'll take some pictures. I don't know. It's just champagne being poured on watches. That's basically the theme. We'll have to figure it out. You want to see brands you've never seen before to broaden your horizons? Okay. I mean, look, that's a very good point. Hopefully, I show people brands that they've never seen before to broaden their horizons. I think that might be the point of this entire exploration of this collection, is to see a variety of watches. People have said, I don't know, I don't see all the videos out there, that, most of the channels have the same content. This is some of the most eclectic mix. So I don't know. If you don't think this is an interesting enough mix, I don't know where else to point you. Hello, Panos from Miami. Someone asked me about Rolex and what the scoop is on the new releases for 2020. I don't even think Rolex knows. Here's what I guess is going to happen. At some point, they're just going to put their watches online for everyone to view. They just might do it that way. They might have an online-only announcement. I'm not sure. To be honest, their production facilities are still closed down. We don't have offices open there. I just don't think that they're really in a rush. If anyone in this industry is not in a rush to release new watches, it's Rolex. And now you may have noticed that Patek Philippe basically said all of 2020 is going to be a wash. We are not even going to try to release anything this year at all. And that's an interesting take that a brand like Patek Philippe can do, because again, they have watches that have such long waiting lists, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to be great for them, but if they just ship more of what's being ordered already, they can basically do the exact same business that they want to do. I'm just looking at some of the comments here. Appreciate everything. Someone is asking me if I miss them. Sure. Hello, Craig from Osaka. Um, Rolex, yeah, Rolex will do what they do when they want to. Yeah, they just price hike some stuff. I mean, look, it's easy to guess what they're going to do. They're going to come out with a few new colors and maybe a new model here and there, and some will be nice. It's going to be the same old Rolex. I'd like to see a new Daytona or a 42 millimeter or larger chronograph. I'm not saying they have to make the Daytona bigger, but I think that a 42 millimeter chronograph is a watch that a lot of people would want from Rolex. Will they make it? I have no idea. I have no idea. Okay, so someone was asking me about a Grand Seiko diver, and that's exactly what this is. This is the Grand Seiko quartz diver. This is a slightly older model, but I love this watch because dive watches are supposed to be utilitarian, and the 9F movement is the most utilitarian movement that you can find in the Grand Seiko collection. So I showed the 9F movement in some other watches, and the 9F movement is just, it's a rock star movement. I also like that in this execution, and most executions of the 9F movement, there's no date. So you actually very rarely have Grand Seiko or Seiko sport watches that have attractive symmetrical dials. And that's what you have here. And the spring drive divers, or the mechanical divers, they're just like a little bit too much. They're very extra. I don't really use that word, but Grand Seiko is supposed to be sort of elegant and wearable and understated and nice. And then you have some of their sport watches, which are, well, they're a little bit all over the place. Here you can see their the micro adjust system here, which is a ratcheting system. And I'll show you something kind of interesting. So this is the white dialed version. This watch also had a black dialed version as well. Both of them have a black bezel. And it's a classic watch in the sense that it doesn't do a lot of modern things. Yes, it's quartz. The bezel's not ceramic. I think it has sort of a very high IP coating on there. So I think more recently they came out with some ceramic bezels for sure and ceramic cases. But this is just a good old-fashioned Grand Seiko dive watch with one of the world's best quartz movements. And one of the things I think is interesting about the 9F is, most people don't know this, it's designed to have a 50-year service life. So, of course, you need to change the batteries and things like that, but this watch is designed to not need servicing for like 50 years, which I think is pretty cool. So this is the micro adjust system here, and again, it's a little on the old school side, even though it works really well. When I say old school, it's just a bunch of stamped parts. You actually push this part back that allows this to open and close. You have a lot of actually movement there. And then you can go ahead and close it up there. And that's how it works. A little on the big side there, you can see kind of how bulky it is. I want to show you a different watch, which is actually, this is an older Orient. And Orient is actually owned by Seiko. And would you look at that? So this watch was, this was one of the fancier Orients. This is their saturation diver. It's actually a little bit heavier than the Grand Seiko, but it uses a lot of the same technology actually. So the bracelets here, it's the same. It's basically the same. So this one as well. This is the first watch I had with this particular micro adjust system. And there it is. And I'm glad that people are complimenting the diversity of the collection. Some GS quartz moves are hand. Yeah, I mean, look, the 9F movement is not a schlub. It's a good movement. It's a very good movement. Do I remember the name of this Orient? Well, we do have an article on the aBlogtoWatch on it. All of these watches have articles on aBlogtoWatch, so you can go back and check out the reference number. But I believe it was just basically called the Orient Saturation Diver. This is a very solid Orient. And one of the things about this, they've updated it since. I don't know that the newer versions look as clean. If you remember a couple episodes ago, I pulled out something called... but the M-Force had the updated movement that offers hand winding. So I guess the only thing that sort of holds me back from recommending this generation, it's not really holding me back, but even though it has a power reserve indicator on the dial, this is before Orient was putting the movements in here that you could manually wind. Someone's asking about the Glashütte Sport Evolution that I promised. Yes, I will go ahead and bring that out another time. I was thinking about it, but people have been asking me how many of these episodes am I going to do. I'm thinking probably in the vicinity of 20 to 25 of them. It's, I mean, how many more videos about, this large assortment of watches can the larger community take? So I think about 20 or 25 of these episodes is what I'll do. And then after that, I'll go ahead and maybe do a little bit more focused discussions on things like that. Because, even though all of you can appreciate a table full of watches, the general watch consumer audience doesn't know what to make of all this. And from a search perspective, it makes a lot more sense to say like, hey, let's look at a couple of high-end, quartz watches, or hey, let's look at 5 chronographs and things like that. That tends to do a little bit better for some mainstream audiences. Remember that these episodes are really for you, the watch lover. My entire goal behind all this was to help bring a sense of community and watch talk to people that weren't able to do it. Adam Cradione is a friend of mine. He started that business, Red Bar. And, the whole point of Red Bar was because guys that like watches like to hang around and chat, and they would go and drink and do that. I don't know that I'd want to drink and talk about watches, but, I like to talk about watches whenever I can. And you guys can't really do that really right now. So I'm trying to wind this. If you remember, this is the hilarious way you have to wind these watches because you can't manually wind them. So you just have to spin the rotor. But the good thing is, see, there's the power reserve indicator. It shows me that I'm doing something right. So I appreciate that. I'm actually just not as much of a drinker. I don't digest alcohol that well myself. It's really a shame because I like the taste of a good drink. So I just say that as a personal thing because I have this oddity about me that I can't enjoy drinking like a lot of the rest of you. But yeah, in theory, enjoying something you like that makes you feel good with watches is wonderful. It's just personally, I don't get the same pleasure out of drinking and watches that the rest of you do. And what I meant was, also, I'd get personally bored sitting where I'm such an active person. I'm like, let's go on a boat, let's go hiking, let's go biking, to talk about watches and see them in action. So I kind of like want to see them. I mean, like, if you look at all these watches, dive watches, pilot watches. Actually, this is mostly dive and pilot watches, but these are meant for active purposes. So the idea of like wearing like, a sport coat and sitting in a bar and being idle while talking about sport watches sounds kind of a little bit strange to me. Drunk boating is great. People rave about it all the time. Look, I support anyone hanging out and enjoying their imbibement of choice. If it's alcohol or something else, hang out online, relax, enjoy a hobby like timepieces you like. There's nothing better in the world than that. Okay, so let's put this one on here. I just want to sort of compare the Orient. This watch was so comfortable. I really love this one. Orient has a more modern version of this. I don't remember the exact design of it, but it has the one that the movement that allows you to manually wind it. And that would be a great watch. These are, I mean, again, if you're looking for your first serious dive watch, and maybe you can't quite find the Seiko for you, or there might be a little bit too expensive, I would really look at one of these Orient saturation divers. And I think what was really impressive to me is that this watch is made very differently than, maybe like a more humble Orient. And this watch is already more than 10 years old here. Thank you for your compliments, Mark. I appreciate that. I'm doing my best. Speaking of active, I look forward to hearing talk watches when skydiving with Formex people. So yeah, I was just talking with Formex. If people remember, we were referring to that the other day. We had a giveaway with Formex. We're supposed to go jump out of a plane, and a aBlogtoWatch audience member is going to join us. That winner was already chosen. That was a giveaway from December 2019. They get a watch, but because of this travel restriction, it's kind of hard to tell. So depending on what's going to happen with everything, we're thinking about maybe doing it in July. Is that a power reserve on the Orient? That is correct, sir. That is a power reserve on the Orient. These straps have always been, I hate putting these straps on. Like, I forget what these straps are called, and they're kind of popular now, but like putting them on is such a pain. All right, let's see here. This is, and then it gets all undone here, which is on an undone. This is one of the undone Snoopy watches. And so if you remember, Omega was very popular with its Snoopy watches. And Omega is by no means, the only company to have Snoopy watches. Undone has done it. Timex has done it. And this is Undone's kind of homage to the Speedmaster and the Snoopy watches. So this watch was like, what, under $300? They called it the Lunar Landing Watches, Space Explorer. You see it says Schultz on the top there for Charles Schultz, the creator of Peanuts. Again, for like, I don't know about these straps. They're comfortable, but I don't know. I'm not really a big fan of these straps. Oh, someone says they had their base camp on. I just think these were definitely a lot of fun and very well made. Okay, so someone is asking if Rolex and Patek Philippe skip 2020 altogether. Does that mean more watches in 2021? No, of course not. It means that they just get to work less in the ensuing years, because I'm going to tell you something. Rolex has tons of watches ready to go. They're not asking themselves, what do we release next year? In Rolex's mind, the thing they need to do is figure out what to release and in what order. But they have years and years of ideas just there. Watches are basically done. A lot of brands have this. They just sort of pick and choose. Someone's asking about Grand Seiko, and yes, this was a Grand Seiko. It was the first watch that I picked up. This is a Grand Seiko diver with the 9F quartz movement there, which is great. Let's look at a mechanical dive watch. I featured this in one of our No Longer Made series, and I guess I have a theme here because we're talking about dive watches that have power reserves. This was the Jean Richard Diver Scope LPR. And look closely there at the 12 o'clock hour marker. Winding it up. LPR stands for Linear Power Reserve. And this watch has one of my favorite power reserves of all time, where the 12 o'clock hour indicator there just fills up red as you wind the watch, and then it goes down to being empty when the power reserve is done. So isn't that fun? There was one generation of watch from Jean Richard. Jean Richard does not exist right now. They are in hibernation, but it is owned by Gerard Perregaux. So it was supposed to be like the budget version of Gerard Perregaux. And like I said, they I don't know what year they went into sort of hibernation. I'm not sure exactly the year that they did that. And when I say hibernation, it's like they've been put on ice. So is this a Gerard Perregaux movement? Yes, this. They rebranded it. They called it like something Jean Richard. But yeah, this is the in-house made movement. This watch was, I think, a little bit more expensive than the market was willing to buy it for when it came out. But the funny thing is, I remember when this watch first came out, being at SIHH and seeing it, thinking this was so cool. And I remember Jean Richard telling me that I was the only journalist in the entire show that even noticed that this watch was interesting or noticed that it had like a cool feature. There was like no one else that was into it. I thought this was absolutely lovely. The diver scope was definitely like Jean Richard's take on the popularity of Panerai, and so it had their own take on this. And I think what's interesting is you have this sort of oblong oval where it's wider than it is tall, or at least appears that way. And I thought it looked very flattering on the wrist. You can see here there's two crowns, and the second crown on the side here is for the inner rotating bezel, which I think is neat. Not that practical when it's on your wrist, meaning you can't really turn this very well, but if you do this when it's off the wrist, I think it's really great. This watch is definitely interesting as well, because if you look at the other diver scopes, because they were less expensive, even things like the case finishing, I don't think were as nicely done. And they had to charge more for this watch because the movement was special. Like, this was a movement that they didn't just have laying around. Unfortunately, you can't see the movement in there. But this is actually fun. This is number 25 that they made in total. And I can't see more than a few hundred of these watches having ever been produced. I really don't know. This is the only one I've actually ever seen anywhere. And I was like, I have to get this watch. So somebody was asking, and I'm not gonna like fully answer the question. People are like, "Oh, do brands just give you all these watches?" No, no. That's. I mean, look. I mean, I'm someone who watch media. It's completely untrue to say I don't get watches from time to time, but they're not free. I work for things, but this is a watch I spent money on. Okay, so I am a collector. I do buy watches, and when I get watches, damn straight I earn them. Damn frickin' straight. Do you have any idea how many millions of dollars of watches just my activity has helped push? I'm not a salesperson, so I don't think about it that way. But if you just like think about all the watches that myself and the rest of the aBlogtoWatch team has helped move over the years, millions upon millions of dollars of watches. Again, we don't talk about money. I don't like to talk about money. I think it's a bit gauche. I don't want to sort of like jump on anyone for talking about money, but at the end of the day, my own values is that things like money and income are very personal. It's not something to be discussed. And we all come to the appreciation of watches from different backgrounds, different lifestyles. I don't come from very much. I'm not a one of those people that just sort of inherited a lot of money or inherited a lot of wealth. And in the watch context, there's a lot of people like that. Who do you think are these young guys buying Richard Milles? You think they're all entrepreneurs that worked hard? No. A lot of them are people that, have family money and just inherited businesses or are independently wealthy and things like that. And that is, that's great for them. But, it becomes unfair when you try to compare your hard work and your life with someone else who just has a completely different upbringing than yours. So watches come in different price points with different levels of quality and prestige and whatever. But at the end of the day, no matter how much money you have, you can still get cool, rare watches that are made well and that express who you are in a good way. So this whole focus on money and things like that, I really, really, really do my best to pull that out of this hobby. I am by no means the wealthiest person in the world. I'm definitely more privileged than a lot of other people out there. And I've worked my goddamn ass off. But this isn't like, oh, look at all these watches. I worked really hard to earn them. This is really about helping everyone get into the hobby, appreciate timepieces, and not necessarily feel bad about where they are. We live in a global world today where it isn't like our measure of success is the biggest house on the block or the wealthiest person in our city or neighborhood. We all have to compare ourselves to incredible levels of wealth and access and opportunity around the globe. No one is going to feel good about themselves if they keep comparing themselves to others. It's impossible. It's not particularly wise. I know it's normal human behavior to do so, but just try to set your own bar for yourself. Don't let other people set it for you. Okay, so going back to Maigret, this is one of the versions of the Moana Pacific Professional. This was supposed to be their slightly more modern-looking dive watch. I love the detailing here on the buckle. Finally, you get to see a little bit of originality in these buckles. Some of these buckles, they use the same exact parts again and again and again. I get so bored seeing them. Here, Maigret did a nice job with a little logo right there, these screws, and again, this is a New Zealand brand. So this watch, I believe, had, I think it was the 9000 series automatic movement in there. I don't think this one's Swiss made. Yeah, this one definitely has a Citizen in there. And this was just a nice overall job from Maigret. This was a limited edition of 500 pieces. I think all their watches are limited editions, but this is one of the first brands that I liked to push on aBlogtoWatch years and years and years ago, and they continue to make nice stuff now. They haven't really innovated too much in design, and it still is very much what I call, Panerai derivative with a little hint of Anonimo in there. That's always been like their bread and butter. But, Anonimo doesn't make watches like this right now, and Panerai can definitely stand the competition. How much was this? I think this was under 1,000. Most of their watches are well under 1,000. Okay, so this is the Maigret Moana Pacific Professional. Nice watch, and I have to say, very, very comfortable. Square watch. What is this thing? Is 650? Is that what someone's saying? This is a clock 2. So this company is mostly known for their clocks, and then they have these wristwatches. And so the idea was that you push this button here, and it lights up. So it's 5 to 4. So the way you read the time there is you actually read it out, and then because the time in text form is only accurate to within 5 minutes, you take these 4 dots here to add up the rest. Mark is agreeing with my philosophy of income and self. Well, thank you, Mark. I'm glad when someone shares my perspective. That's very validating. Okay, so once again, let's push this here. It's 5 to 4. So that would actually mean if you add all these up, that it's actually 1 to 4. So it'd be 3:59 if you added this up. I don't know if this watch is actually set to the right time right now, but that's essentially how it does. And then I think there was another way, if you push, so you push this twice, maybe that's the date, and then you push it again, that's the seconds. Actually, that's my favorite view. Isn't that neat? Most people don't know that it can do that. So this is the Clock 2. I think this is the 42. Their first watch was a little bit on the small side for me. And again, I like big watches. It's just a personal thing. But this is the bigger, I think, maybe it's, no, this is the 39. One of them is 39. I don't remember exactly. This is a German brand. Yeah, so the complicated thing is so Clock 2 is German. Well, it's German. Let's put it that way. Yes. Who is saying this doesn't make any sense? It is 4 o'clock. I mean, I just think this is a great concept. This is definitely a conversation piece, not super practical. I wish there was some way you could like flick your wrist. And again, today with smartwatches and things like that, you can see that there's a lot of ways for them to, sort of be a little bit more modern. But this is super fun. And again, this company is mostly known for their clocks. So they have desk clocks and wall clocks, different sizes, pretty expensive stuff. But the wall clocks are. The watch wasn't too bad. It's a few $100. Yeah, isn't that big seconds great? What else did we got to show? Speaking of digital, this is a Ventura. This was one of the V Sparks. VTech Sigma. VTech Sigma. And there was a lot of high-end digital watches that came from Ventura over the years. This is just one, and I wanted to show you this because I think the LCD system that they used was quite nice. And what you did in order to sort of like adjust stuff is this was like a little scroll wheel. So let's see how that works here. Push it in. I guess I can make the seconds disappear. You can set the alarm, chronograph. So you still have the time up there. I don't know if you can hear those beeps. It's kind of fun. Again, it's for the right type of person, right? Who wears a timepiece like this? You're definitely someone that, is an interesting, eccentric individual. What I think was interesting is this generation didn't have it. I didn't think they were necessarily as attractive. But right here on some other ones and different cases, they would cut out an opening and they would put in a rotor. And so you had these quartz watches that, similar to like a Seiko Kinetic or others that used a rotor to charge, it would generate power by the rotor moving. So that's how it would generate electricity in some of the other versions. Maybe those are the V Sparks. I'm not sure necessarily, but that is a Ventura VTech, and these were really, really interesting, really nicely made stuff. But again, high-end quartz. So the alien, as you say, yeah. Speaking of quartz, this is a G-Shock right here. This was one of the Master of G watches. This was one of the marine ones. Sorry, it's dirty here. I mean, it goes to show that I wear these watches. This one I thought was interesting because it had a little bit of a different look than some of the other G-Shocks. The dial was a little bit cleaner, and it was just interesting to me because it had a very different look. I also like this because the dial had this sort of persistent tide graph, which again, most people don't necessarily need that, but it's interesting to have tide graphs. And I just love the design of the dial. I just thought this worked really nice. It's definitely a larger watch, and so I wouldn't necessarily wear it on a daily basis all the time. But as you know, Casio does such a great job making these watches just really comfortable. And again, these watches are all ones that I've gone ahead and reviewed on aBlogtoWatch. This bezel is kind of interesting because it's related to the barometric pressure function. So you see it says BARO, that's for barometer. And apparently they were thinking that people would, use this a lot more when they were trying to figure out the weather. I'm trying to see here if I can show you. Maybe that's the wrong button. This just changes that. It's a backlight. There we go. So now we're on the barometric pressure function. Here's the compass function. So again, it's just interesting to see how each of these dials plays with it. So this is the compass function that you have, and you can see that the seconds hand turns into the compass needle, and then you can see the actual degrees in the digital screen. So again, if you're an outdoors person, you like playing stuff like that, or you need that, that's always appreciated. What is next? Here is an Atelier Wen. This is a relatively new brand that's the whole point was to celebrate Chinese watchmaking. And this is, I think, someone that, I want to say they used to work at Richemont or one of the big groups. And they identified that, hey, there's an opportunity to make a watch brand that's a little bit more high-end. I think this is still under $1,000, that celebrates Chinese culture, especially since a lot of stuff is made in China. So this movement proudly has, all Chinese-made everything, and a dial that attempts to sort of celebrate Chinese culture a little bit. I don't have any Mings, actually. I know Ming pretty well, but I don't have any of the watches. Not right now. They're okay. So this is the Atelier Wen, and it came on 2 straps. The case is, definitely looks like a Carrera. There's that. But I thought they did a really nice job here. I thought this was very, very attractive. And I believe that this uses, is it enamel dial? Oh, no, they had one that was jade. I remember that. But the funny thing is, like, when you wind the movement, like, immediately, like, yeah, that's not a Swiss movement. And if you've been into watches as long as me, just by winding a watch, you definitely know what it is, or at the very least what it's not. This was, I want to say, 39 millimeters wide, which was a pretty good size, especially given the fact that the case is on the thicker side. So I can definitely pull that off. A few of his enablers. What is blue shirt? Sorry, I'm just trying to read these comments here. Hello, Steve. All right, so that is the Atelier. And this strap, I forget what the strap was. It was like, what material was this thing? It was like fish scales or something like that. I think it was a fish scale strap. I could be wrong on that, but that or some reptile. But it may have been a fish scale strap. Oh, hello from the Azores. I've always wanted to go there. What's next here? So somebody was asking about Filippo Loretti the other day, and this is, I think this is called the Renaissance Collection. This is one of their nicer pieces, and I saw a different version of this. Someone was wearing it at the airport, and I was like, it made me happy to see that, actually, because, brands like Filippo Loretti are like in the MVMT and Daniel Wellington generation of brands, and they get people in with these very inexpensive, like $100 quartz movements. But as I was trying to say, is they all, at some point, eventually follow the allure of the mechanical watch. So this was one of Filippo Loretti's first attempts at making sort of an enthusiast watch. I think they did a nice job. It's a Japanese Miyota movement in there that has a powers indicator, a synchronized, well, it's this what looks like a moon phase indicator is an AM/PM AM/PM indicator, and then it had a day-date complication there in the month. So this was a complete calendar with some nice complications on there. For someone as their quote-unquote first complicated watch, for a few $100, makes total sense. Makes total sense to do that. You can't see the movement, wasn't great, but they try to connect all these two various elements of, Italian culture. So they have, this is the Basilica di San Marco. They just, again, they were just trying to do something that made sense in sort of the luxury sphere. Not the thinnest watch in the world. I'd say that's probably one of my complaints, but that's really related to the movement. But again, for a few $100s, definitely not bad. I think that there's a lot to be said about this over a lot of similarly priced watches from brands in the Swatch Group and things like that. So some of these brands, I wouldn't just write them off completely. They definitely have things that are interesting. Going back to Japan, this is one of the early Citizen Eco Drive watches with GPS. So this was called the Satellite Wave, and this was obviously a pilot style watch, and I thought this was very handsome. It wasn't too big. This is at the time where the GPS watches were getting smaller and smaller and smaller. If you remember, like Casio's first GPS watch was massive, Citizen's first GPS watch was massive, and then they started going down in size. And so this one, of course, is all analog. The movement it's Eco Drive, so it hasn't been charged. But you have these combinational elements. It's very pilot watch style, of course, with that slide rule bezel. But then you also have the modern features such as the satellite connection, which you use to update the time from anywhere in the world. And so these days, I guess there's enough GPS watches out there that people don't think about too much. But this is revolutionary, right? You are put yourself in the shoes where you don't know where you are. You wake up one day, you have no idea where you are, and you want to know the time. This can sync up with a satellite, assuming you have line of sight, and get you the right time. And that's really, really cool. Diameter on this watch, maybe 44, 45. I don't remember. Again, what's important is not the width, but it's the lug-to-lug distance. And this one doesn't go past my wrist, so it's fine. And I found this to be very, very comfortable. And, even though a lot of the Japanese bracelets are a little bit more on the simple side, they really focus on ergonomics, in my opinion, way more than a lot of the Swiss ones. But honestly, in the context of Citizen bracelets, this one's really, really nice. And I liked how these are nice, chunky pieces of metal as opposed to stamped deployants. And I mean, I don't know, I get kind of annoyed with stamped deployants. The Grand Seiko is a little bit of a mix, but like these parts right here, well, actually this isn't bad. I'm trying to find one that has stamped parts. There's definitely a lot of Seiko watches that have stamped parts. I'm like literally looking around. I don't think I have any that per se have stamped parts on there. But okay, so this is the new King Turtle, which again is a great watch, but a little bit on the less expensive side. And you can see how these parts, these are stamped. So this is a stamped piece of metal. And I'm not saying that this isn't produced the same way, but this is a thicker gauge of metal. It's made a slightly nicer finishing. So both Citizen and Seiko make different grades. I'm just showing you one way of evaluating little things like the hardware inside of a deployant. So again, I don't remember the exact name of this, but this is the Citizen Eco Drive Satellite Wave, and this was one of the pilot watches, and it was great. Oh, it's making a bunch of noises. Oh, that's this. Just in case you were curious what the alarm sounds like on a Ventura. I've heard worse alarms. Oh, look, there's more Seiko. This is a Presage. This was the cocktail time. I thought this was really funky. I'm sorry, I'm just reading some of these comments here. The countdown timer's going up. So this is the Citizen Presage cocktail time. And even though this is a men's watch, it came with, I think this is called patent leather, where it's like shiny leather. The stitching is blue. And, I like to joke around a lot that not every single one, but a lot of the time on both Seiko and Citizen, when you buy the watch, one of the first things you think of is, I should replace the strap. And, oh, is that one of the Navahawks? I'm not sure if this was part of the Navahawk collection, to be honest. I know the Navahawk has always been analog digital. It might be, but I don't think it was part of I think it was just part of the Satellite Wave collection. Was it the Navahawk ProMaster? I mean, look, the Navahawk is definitely a Citizen product. I'm just not sure that was one of them. But maybe it was. I mean, it says it on aBlogtoWatch. All you didn't need to do is search that. Anyway, so it's a funny joke that a lot of people have. maybe it's just my joke. I don't know. Maybe it's just an aBlogtoWatch joke. But then when you when you get one of these watches, the first thing you ask yourself is like, what strap do I actually want it on? Because this is fine, but I don't know how often a guy wants to wear a shiny black strap. I don't know what you'd put on here. The crown is too big, but it's comfortable. It's comfortable. So I just thought this was nicely done. And then again, for the money, this is a nice looking movement. Like, you look at some of the entry level Miyota 8000 series movements that's produced by a Citizen, which is a competitor. They don't look nearly as nice. But for the money, this is a really decent looking movement for sure. I'm not alone in saying that the first thing to change with a Seiko is the strap. Yeah, I mean, it's it's cute. It's kind of like it's Seiko or Citizen's suggested strap. And you're like, I appreciate the suggestion, but nobody really wants to wear it on that. All right, what other weird things can I bring out here? I'm jumping between dress watches and sport watches. This is kind of interesting. This is the Devosa. This is the apnea diver. And let me show you some of the stuff that this watch does. There is a Junghans, yes. There is a Junghans. Okay, so let's see here. I'm like, why is this not working? Then I realized, wrong crown. There's the crown, it's on the top. So the apnea diver, apnea diving is essentially another term for free diving, but in English language, apnea is often associated with a breathing disorder while you're sleeping. So I always thought it was weird that they decided to call this the apnea diver, even though that's what it is. This watch is very pretty, by the way. And so what's the point of this watch? I'll show you in a second here. It's kind of a loose association with apnea diving. I don't know the whole deal, but essentially the watch actually comes out of the case here. So let me try to do that. There we go. So the watch comes out of the case, and you can put it on a desk. I think it has this little fold-out foot. Yeah, here we go. So this little foot folds out, and better than the schizophrenia diver, I agree. And so the idea is that you can practice holding your breath, because an apnea diver would practice holding their breath. So these little lines would be, I don't know, you'd measure certain things that's a 10-minute period, that's a 5-minute period, so use that to measure. I guess, if you're the professionals can hold their breath for, 5 minutes or so. But this, let me just find a free space here, just kind of sits there, and now you have a little, what I think is funny, but this is a true desk diver because it's a dive watch that you can just stick on your desk. That's all that folds up, but I guess you could put that in other places. Maybe put it in your pocket, make a pendant out of it. But that's the apnea professional, 200 meters of water resistance, and here's the kind of case. So I think that it was a little gimmicky, but you know what? These are watches. They're supposed to be gimmicky. In fact, when they're not gimmicky, I get very, very bored. I want gimmicks. So then you just screw this back in here, and you put it on your watch, and then you're ready for free diving with no air. So that is the apnea dial. I just thought I like the dial. I think what really attracted to me this is the simplicity of the dial, the legibility, the colors. This was also a limited edition. I don't remember how many pieces, but this was really a neat timepiece from Devosa, I have to say. Okay, I may not actually get to every single one of these watches, and if I don't, I will talk more about them next time. It wouldn't pop out inside pressured water. I don't know. This is an Austrian brand, Swiss-made watch, but an Austrian brand. Karl Suki and Son. You should hate that Devosa, but you don't. Why should you hate the Devosa? That's an interesting thing to say. This is one of my favorite modern dress watch designs. It's funny because the brand actually went to a designer in Vienna that never designed watches before, the student, and said, hey, could you design a watch? And the actual design that the student came up with was even a little bit more interesting than this. but for cost reasons, the company couldn't engineer everything. So, for example, there was this really interesting strap system that they developed that I'm not sure ever got made. This is a Vaucher micro rotor automatic movement. So this is a pretty fancy movement, I have to say. Vaucher, of course, is Swiss, and Vaucher is known for things like making a lot of movements for Richard Mille and things like that. So this watch was nice, and my favorite element here was the subsidiary seconds dial was a little disc, and it may be a little bit difficult to see the texturing, but the dial has, on this half, has vertical lines, and on this half has horizontal lines. And that's mimicked on the disc there, so you see that even though it's the same color, they have slightly different textures, and it plays with it well. This watch was I just love this watch. Austrians are great at gun making. I was not aware of that, but now I know that information. So let's put this watch on so I can show you. I think this watch was 42 millimeters wide. I think this is called the Waltz 1. Why? Because it's Austrian, of course. And that's all that one does in Austria, is hang out in Vienna and go to waltzes. Isn't that a pretty dress watch? The funny thing is I don't wear formal clothes that often. I don't even like long sleeves, but there's a special place in my heart for like elegant dress watches, especially ones that you don't need to be in a dressy environment to wear. This one is very fantastic. I love the concave dial there. Just a very nice design overall. Like this brand a lot. They did a good job. This watch actually has a skeletonized version as well, which looks okay, but I think I prefer this one a little bit more. So this is the Carl Suki and Son. What else we got here? What else do we got? What do I want to talk? I guess I'll talk about the Junghans. So this watch is interesting because it's definitely not for everyone. I think you can order it with a sapphire crystal, but this one has an acrylic crystal. If someone's asking about prices and things like that, I don't necessarily remember all that, but if you go to aBlogtoWatch.com, I have covered not all, but virtually all the watches that I'm talking about at some point on aBlogtoWatch, and you should go check that out for everything like prices and names and stuff like that. Do I have any favorite collaborations? Oh, that's a whole other thing. I like collaboration watches in general. I think that that's sort of a marketing strategy or initiative that needs to continue more and more. When successful, those can be really nicely done. I think I really appreciate this watch because of the price and the fact that you don't have that many of these triple calendar, so to say, watches that are particularly affordable. And so what do you have here? So you have a base ETA movement. And then the module has calendar indicators for the day of the week, the month, the date, and then you have a moon phase indicator in there. And the overall elegance of the dial just makes me very, very happy. Oh, the car watch collaborations. I'm just seeing a comment on that. Oh, man. Some of them are better than others. I actually think that Hublot's relationship with Ferrari has resulted in some products that really make a lot of sense for that collaboration as well. Obviously, the famous failure was Panerai working with Ferrari. And then you had those Panerai Ferrari watches that, like, they couldn't give them away. That was like your best chance to get an inexpensive Panerai was about 10 years ago trying to pick up one of the Panerai Ferrari watches. And then Hublot just did that so much better. And I think what was interesting about that is they made an entirely new collection for that. They didn't just try to rebrand something. And they realized that people still want to see Hublot on the dial. They want to see a watchmaker on the dial. They don't want to see a car maker on the dial. Also, there's been some instances where Volkswagen design and Audi design have designed some watches. I think there's a Fortis that's a Volkswagen design Fortis, which was cool. And you have things like the Hublot, I think it's called the Tech Frame, which was actually designed by Ferrari's team. So it wasn't even an Hublot design. Hublot built it, but that was actually designed by Oh, and then you have some of the Beauvais watches designed by Pininfarina Those are really cool as well, again, because they're designed by Pininfarina. So it's a whole other discussion there, for sure. So many comments, just to try to keep these up here. Someone's mentioning Autodromo. Yeah, there's definitely nice ones out there. But, what I don't like is just like dual branded watches where it's like, you like this watch, you like this car company, so boom. Some of them have come out okay, but I think of like the Bulgari Maserati. The watches were nice, but what was really Maserati about it? Not too much. In fact, and then you think of the, was it Audemars Piguet that made, it was like a millinery version for Maserati, which was pretty weird as well. There's cool ones out there. Oh, the Giugiaro for Seiko. Yeah, that's good stuff as well. So when you have a car designer actually come in and design watches, that's cool. Speaking of Audemars Piguet, Octavio Garcia, who was their designer for many years, who now does Gorilla, he also comes from an automotive design background. So there's a lot of them. Oh, and then the Parmigiani Bugatti, which, look, those watches are interesting. They're not necessarily my cup of tea, but they try to do something unique and original, and I got to give them credit for that. This watch is from Montfort, which is still a relatively new Swiss brand, and their whole thing is 3D printed dials. IWC and Mercedes, going back to that conversation, I'm like, this is what's coming to mind. I'm like, okay, Ariel, think of one watch that you can think of that came as a result of that. So I know that they have the relationship with the Mercedes Petronas team, of course, but like there was like a Lewis Hamilton watch. I can't think about them. I mean, the Richard Mille ones are really cool when they did. The entire brand is inspired by cars. The Engineer AMG watch? Yeah, they had one, but the question is, like, what was AMG about it? Yeah, it said it, but, like, was there anything specially AMG about it? I don't know. So this one was interesting because this had, I like the black execution there of the move. I think this was a Solita in there, and they had this very interesting execution. Cool case design, and again, the whole point of the dial was that it was 3D printed. So they had a few different dial options you can get. This one was not too expensive a watch, but I love the personality here. I love the fact that this was casual, but just really rich with personality. So this is a nice, Swiss-made watch, but just doesn't look, cool strap, right? Like the quilting there. I don't know what that's called. With those I guess it's like these horizontal wedges of quilting. Nice case shape, right? Not bad at all. Not bad at all. Sorry, what is someone mentioning about? People come into the episode a little bit after I started, so they didn't necessarily remember. Oh, they were talking about this, the Clock 2. This is the Clock 2. I think this is the Q. Sorry, it's all dirty. I forget which one this is. Is it the 39? Yeah, this has got to be the 39. So they had a smaller one. Sorry, I should clean these up beforehand. I should trade my job to be a Mercedes Petronas, and not on purpose. Like, it'd be an accent. Be like, look, I'm sorry. The acceleration is really sensitive, and I guess it brakes really well, but it's hard to control. I would probably destroy a lot of cars in the process. I don't know that I would be very hireable for that job, but I appreciate that. I mean, it's fun. It's a very prestigious job, and I do like to drive fast. I definitely like to drive fast. I'll tell you that. It really annoys me when others don't like to drive fast. It's like, why do you go so slow in the canyons? Come on. I mean, I live in LA here. We have so much fun, like fast canyon driving. David Breton from the aBlogtoWatch team, I remember one time he came out to LA, and we've come out to LA more than once, and he's also really into driving. We're all, of course, big car guys. So we rented a Corvette, and we wanted to take it through the Angeles National Forest. But apparently the Corvette was not designed for the type of driving that we wanted to do, which involved changing gears a lot. And we overheat the transmission all the time. So like this poor rented car, we couldn't even push it because we kept overheating the transmission. I've never even overheated a transmission in any car, but apparently that car is not designed for constantly changing gears. I would be the CEO of a diving, hiking watch brand. You know what? Hiking underwater. Now that is the activity for me. So I think we need to go back to those, those like giant like diving suits with like the diving helm that are so heavy that you have to walk underwater. Let's bring that back. So you could walk easily underwater and you're just taking a hike under the water. I fully support you. We bring that activity back, and I'm going to be on board of the company making watches for those gentlemen. This is a Collins watch, and I'm showing it next to the Laco here so you can sort of see where the theme are. Collins is an LA-based brand. This is one of those micro brands, and they're good for entry-level enthusiasts, but they did this watch right here with a meteorite dial that I just thought was really nicely done. A few $100. You got an ETA movement in there. I believe that's an ETA in there. And I just thought they did a pretty nice job here. Just sort of this gunmetal finish. The apnea diver, falling off an underwater cliff in one of the suits would suck. Well, you have to avoid that. What's a sport without some danger? David and I, speaking of that a couple of years ago, we were in England with Bremont, and Bremont has that relationship with Jaguar, and we got close to Jaguar, and it was I like those people there a lot, and so they gave us an F-Type with the 8-cylinder engine to drive around in England, and the funny thing is I'm an American, so there's the driving on the other side of the road thing, which I picked up pretty quickly actually, but I did not actually appreciate that, especially in the countryside, many English roads are very, very narrow and it's raining. So we were driving around this very powerful F-Type, and I can't tell you how many times we almost died. Like, it's a very stable car, but we fishtailed, and oh my God. Do not let the aBlogtoWatch team drive with a powerful car in wet weather with narrow streets. That's all I have to say. We could talk about cars way too much. So this is the Collins watch with the meteorite dial. I thought it was pretty nice, and around the same price was this one. And this is the Laco Pilot. Now they were trying to make a less expensive watch. So what they did is, rather than having a Swiss movement, this has our meteorite dials brittle. I mean, you're not going to be touching the dial. This is the Taup one. They had a Taup dial, so it has a Miyota 8 series movement that I'm not the biggest fan of. This watch was like under $500, but this taupe dial, I don't know what it was. It's sort of like it's like a gray with a slightly brown tint to it. Looks like a Parnas. I don't know that I've actually seen a Parnas, but there's a lot of watches this style. This is again a Laco, and I fell in love with this dial color. I know what it is. I just love this dial color. How is this? People bring up Archie Luxury a lot in the comments. How is he doing these days? I haven't had a chance to chat with him. What has he been talking about since COVID-19 and all that? So yeah, the taupe dial on this is just, he is kind of freaked out. Would you like to explain a little bit more what you mean by that? Speaking of vintage style pilot watches, this is probably this is a sleeper hit for me. I love this watch. Over the last few years, this is one of my favorite ones that I evaluated. I never know that I like this. This was called the Zero Zen. What was it called? Zero Zen? Something like that. I don't know what's going on with this company right now. What you need to know about this company, which is Terracella Mare, is that I believe it's an Italian brand, and their family produces a lot of cases and things like that for Audemars Piguet. So this is the in-house brand there. And they were a little expensive. He's not drinking as much, so that's good. Well, good for Paul. I appreciate that. This was a limited edition, and it used a small piece of metal from a Japanese Zero plane, and they put that in the side there. So there was a plane. This was from World War II that was, I don't know, it was abandoned or captured in the Pacific. And then they took some pieces off that, and they put that right here. This was a limited edition of quite a few number of watches. I think it was like 80 something, maybe even less. Titanium case, obviously coated in black. And I think what was so special about it is that you wind the watch with the bezel. So the bezel is actually connected through gearing here to the movement. So I'm actually winding the watch by doing this. And I thought that was fantastic. And then you want to adjust the time. What you would do is just take your finger right here. There's actually a little arrow. and you just open that part out, and then now you can use the bezel to adjust the time, which I thought was just so slick. The combination of that, the comfort. This channel is family friendly. Oh, is Archie not family friendly? I guess he still uses a lot of terminology that is frowned upon for the child friendly video standards on YouTube. Is that right? Oh, hello from Guadalajara. Oh, he throws a lot of F-bombs. Yes, this is Japanese on the back. So that was kind of what was strange about this. This is an Italian brand that made this limited edition, which was inspired by the Japanese Zero plane, which I think was the Mitsubishi something. It was called the Zero. And this has a little piece of a Zero on there. So this is actual original red paint. I think it was taken from part of the fuselage where there was a red sun, for Japan. And this is supposed to look a little bit like the slip and skid kind of instrument on there. And then you can see a little bit of the movement on there. Yeah, the Zero Sen. That's what it was, the Zero Sen. I was like, no sin? I was like, the Zero Sin? I mean, that's actually a good name, the Zero Sin. The very puritanical watch. The Mitsubishi A6M Raisen is the official name. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, so Earth, Sky, Sea, that is what Taro Cellamare translates to. So, there's the limited edition, limited to 88 pieces. That's what it is. I was looking for it. It's right there on the dial. So this is the Zero Sen. I loved this watch. Totally a sleeper hit. There was a limited edition version that was before this watch that came out that Taro Cellamare made that had the same crown system. I don't know if they've made any since. And again, this brand right now is in hibernation. So look at that strap. I love that strap. That organic texture there. I mean, I'm not as much of a strap nerd as some of you guys are, but I will definitely appreciate a good strap. This is a nice strap. Bronze. That's a whole other thing. I got a bronze watch coming in, actually. And maybe I'll take that opportunity to show some bronze watches. What I'd actually like to do is pull out some of my bronze watches and show you like how they have patinaed over time. What's right out of the frame to the right? Oh, this one. This is just my Laco Radox. I like having this one around. I don't want to like push it too many times, but I just wanted to compare it a little bit here because we designed this with Laco, and I just wanted to sort of say, this is the very simple version. This is obviously more complicated. And one of the things that people don't necessarily understand about the Radox, and this watch was, I think, about $2,800. This was $500. And people are like, oh, why is it so expensive? They don't realize the amount of customization that had to go into this. So this dial, these hands, this case, this strap, all of this was created from scratch. Like, this was not stock Laco parts that we just decorated slightly differently. This is a completely different watch from scratch. And you can see there that the lug design is even different there. And these watches were made to look brand new and then hand-aged by one person, the watch itself, in Laco. And then I also had to explain that what we needed to do to make sure that the artificial aging was consistent is we needed to make sure that the watch case and the strap, because they're made by two different people, matched together. And they did really well. And then yet a third entity hand-aged the presentation kit that came with this. So anyways, that's just sort of part of the storytelling that goes into that. How in the world do you choose what watch to wear every day? Well, that's a very good question. Some days I just don't leave the house. I start shaking on the floor because I can't decide what watch to wear. And once I'm in one of those fits, I will be in sort of a watch choice fugue, possibly for 72 to 96 hours before I choose. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, look, it's hard sometimes, but I think there's 2 days, right? There's days where, do you choose the watch to match the outfit, or do you choose the watch to go with what you're doing? And once in a while, I'm just like, you know what? I feel like this kind of guy this kind of watch guy today, and this is what I want to watch. So I have to like build what I'm wearing or even what I'm doing around this. So I'm like, I feel like wearing this. Where can I go with this? And then I'll choose that. Yeah, so sometimes the watches match the mood, and sometimes you try to match your mood to the watch, which I also think is a very interesting exercise. Someone's mentioned the Orient. Yeah, it is awesome. I don't think okay, it's not discontinued because I think there's a modern version of this that they come out that they're producing. I don't know for sure, but I believe that there's a newer version of this. I don't know if they're quite as nice because this was a fantastic watch. I believe I covered everything here. I actually thought I was going to do a short show, but this has been over an hour. If I forgot anything, then we'll talk about it next time. I want to thank everyone so very much for joining us on these episodes. I really like having a conversation with everyone. Someone is saying the modern version of this Orient is called the Triton. I don't know if it's exactly the same. It might be pretty similar. Take care, everyone. You know all the things I like to say. Keep sane in there. Remember, we'll get through all these crazy times. We're living through a war. That's what it is. And we get to have an opportunity to tell great stories to people. Tragedies are terrible. It's only human to feel bad for people that are suffering, people losing their lives. But at the end of the day, I think the world is going to be a better place. Let's just wait for things to get started again. Have a great day. Talk to you next time. Bye, everyone.